My narcissistic older sister tried to seduce my fiancé before my wedding in an attempt to break us up, but she was caught on camera and disowned by our parents. This is about my 29-year-old sister, Dove, who has always resented me, believing I was living a life I didn't deserve. She's divorced, jobless, and living with my parents after dropping out of college for a rich boyfriend who later divorced her when her true nature came to light. Growing up, our relationship was strained. She was always the pretty, smart one, full of herself, and constantly praised by our parents. Meanwhile, I was left feeling inadequate. People would rave about her looks while I felt invisible, which hurt deeply. She'd use her status to mess with my self-esteem, saying no one liked me. These childhood jabs left me extremely insecure, with my parents always overlooking my feelings and siding with her. As a result, I distanced myself from them. As a child, she'd often have friends over while our parents were at work, and they'd mess with my room. Once, they ruined a project, nearly causing me to fail, but Dove blackmailed me, threatening to share embarrassing photos with my classmates if I told our mom. She never took responsibility for her actions, and telling my parents felt useless since they never paid attention. Over the years, she did many things that made me despise her. Mom never supported me, though Dad would occasionally call her out. Once, she used my phone to send weird pictures of me to my friend group because I complained to Dad. Another time, she spilled coffee on my prom dress, then cried, playing the victim and claiming it was an accident. After that, I stopped confiding in him. I never understood why my sister harbored so much hatred toward me. Later, I realized it wasn't about me. It was her narcissism. She was the major problem in all her relationships, cheating on every guy she dated, and, as much as I hate to admit it, she was a gold digger. Her ex is still my friend, which says a lot. Essentially, she was evil as a teen, and adulthood didn't change her. In fact, her behavior worsened. I blame my parents for never disciplining her. After school, things improved for me. I worked hard, got into my dream college, and after some struggles, landed my dream job. That's where I met the love of my life, Atlas, at a work conference. He was smart, kind, and handsome, and we instantly connected. Within a few months, we were dating, traveling together for vacations and trips, which strengthened our relationship. Atlas was close to his family, so he introduced me to his siblings and parents early on. However, I hesitated to introduce him to mine. The main reason for my delay was Dove and her malicious tendencies. I always had a gut feeling she would try to ruin everything. She always had the best growing up, and now that my life was going better than hers, I knew she couldn't stand it, especially the fact that I was in a happy relationship. Still, I couldn't put it off forever. After a year and a half of dating, Atlas started questioning my reluctance to introduce him to my family. So, I told my dad about him. He was happy I'd found someone who was good for me and invited us over for dinner. While I was excited, I was also stressed, knowing Dove could sabotage my life. Though Atlas knew about my family dynamics, I shared more details about Dove, and he was cool about it, assuring me he could handle the situation. A few days after talking to Dad, Dove called me. This was shocking because she had never reached out before. She asked about Atlas and when we were visiting home, but her interest seemed more focused on learning all the details about him. I'm guessing my mom must have told Dove that I was dating Atlas and that things were getting serious. Now she's trying to cozy up to me, and I know exactly why. Her intentions are far from good. I'm worried about whether I should even take the risk of introducing Atlas to Dove, knowing how manipulative she can be. I'm also considering an alternative plan, inviting my parents over to my place to introduce Atlas without involving Dove. Update 1. Thanks for all the helpful advice. Some of you asked for more details about Dove, so here we go. It's true that my parents, especially my dad, started seeing Dove differently after her divorce. She brought that on herself. She was academically talented, but once she entered college, her focus shifted entirely to her appearance and social life. That's when she met Jeremy, a very wealthy guy, and quickly got into a relationship with him, neglecting her studies. During my senior year of high school, I was preparing for my college entrance exams. Dove constantly belittled me, telling me I'd never get into my dream college. But I did, and for the first time, I got some validation from my parents. They were genuinely happy and proud of me. This, of course, made Dove envious because the attention wasn't on her for once. My parents even threw a small party to celebrate my achievement, inviting close family and friends. Dove, not wanting to be outdone, decided to announce her engagement to Jeremy right in the middle of my celebration. You could tell by Jeremy's expression that he had no idea this was coming, but Dove achieved her goal of making the day about her. Everyone was suddenly more interested in her engagement to Jeremy because of his wealth, and my moment was overshadowed. Dove often flaunted the expensive gifts Jeremy bought her, reminding me that I'd never land a rich husband because, according to her, I was ugly and no one would ever want to date me. She constantly tried to make me feel worthless. I shot back once, telling her I wasn't a gold digger like her and that I could pay my own bills, while she could keep chasing after rich men. After about a week, Dove and Jeremy got officially engaged. By that time, I had already started college and didn't attend the engagement. I stopped talking to her during my time at college, and coming home for holidays felt like a relief since Dove was living with Jeremy. Even during those breaks, she would often be on vacation with him in some exotic location. After dating for a year, they got married in a lavish ceremony, with Jeremy footing most of the bill. Dad covered some of the costs, but only as a courtesy since Dove wasn't contributing anything financially. Their marriage didn't last long, though. After 3 years, they got divorced. The reason I heard was that Jeremy wanted to have kids, but Dove was adamantly against becoming a mother. Jeremy told me he never pressured Dove about having kids, but he hated that she avoided the conversation for 3 years and never disclosed her true feelings beforehand. He also revealed her excessive drinking, partying, and flirting with men at bars. According to Jeremy, Dove married him solely for his money, with no real emotional connection. I couldn't believe he hadn't realized her motives earlier. He even showed me videos of her going out drinking, where men would touch her inappropriately, and she wouldn't stop them. Honestly, it was good for him that he got rid of her. My parents, however, sided with Dove after the divorce, blaming Jeremy for forcing her into wanting kids, never acknowledging any fault on her part. After their split, Dove moved back in with my parents since she had no job or education to fall back on. She had dropped out of college to marry Jeremy, and 5 years later, she had no degree and no work experience. She pretended to be traumatized by the divorce, but in reality, she seemed thrilled to be free. Within a month, she was back to her old habits of clubbing, partying, and hooking up with random guys. Her Instagram stories made it clear that her life revolved around weekly dates and ghosting people. 2 years into my career, I landed my dream job with a great salary, and my parents were overjoyed. I visited home after receiving the job offer, and Dad was so proud of me. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. During dinner, Dove came home, half drunk. Dad was clearly upset and told her she should have focused on her education like I did, instead of wasting her life with Jeremy. He even pointed out how much I was earning, while Dove was still financially dependent on them. Mom tried to defend Dove, telling Dad not to make such comments, but that's when Dove lost it. She slammed the door in anger, and that's when Dad finally realized just how spoiled she had become. Dad finally had enough and told Mom to talk some sense into Dove, insisting that she take her life seriously and stop relying on them financially. Dove must have overheard this because later that night she came into my room and said I could never be like her, no matter how much money I earned. She body shamed me, pointing out my belly fat and chubby cheeks. As a teen, those comments would have crushed me, but now I just didn't care. I laughed and told her I didn't want to be anything like her and that she clearly needed to fix her attitude. That hit a nerve. She completely lost it, unleashing her fury and demanding I leave the house. I calmly reminded her that it was my parents' house, and she had no right to boss me around. The next morning, as I was packing to return home, I found that 2 of my dresses had been slashed, clearly cut with scissors. Furious, I took the ruined dresses downstairs and showed them to my parents. Dad was livid and called Dove down in anger. But as usual, Mom tried to make excuses, saying Dove was in shock and didn't know what she was doing. This time, though, Dad wasn't having it. He told Mom to stay out of it and stormed at Dove, warning her to get her life together. He made it clear that he would no longer support her or tolerate her narcissistic behavior. Dove didn't take the confrontation well and blamed me for everything, harboring even more hatred towards me. I was used to her animosity, but things escalated when she made advances on my boyfriend. That was the breaking point. After much thought and discussing it with Atlas, I finally decided it was time to introduce him to my parents in person. Hiding him from Dove wasn't going to work. She would have found a way to insert herself into our lives eventually, no matter what I did. My friends advised me that it was better to test Atlas now than risk losing him later. Dove could only succeed in her malicious intentions if Atlas gave in. So, with much dread, I finally took Atlas to meet my parents. From the moment we arrived, Dove was all over him, practically throwing herself at him. While he was politely greeting my parents, Dove pushed herself on him for a hug, completely disregarding any sense of boundaries. She had gone to great lengths to change her appearance, dyeing her blonde hair black, getting dressed up in a new outfit, with her nails and hair all done as if she was the one meeting Atlas for a date. She kept trying to force herself into the conversation, but it was clear that everyone, including Atlas, was ignoring her antics. At dinner, Dove rushed to sit beside Atlas, and when I asked her to move so I could sit next to him, she shot me an annoyed look before reluctantly shifting. She kept asking Atlas about his interests, and whenever he mentioned liking something, she'd claim to like it too, even when it was obvious she didn't. Then she'd make snide comments about how she and Atlas were so compatible, winking at me as if to say, "Don't take it seriously." But it was clear her intentions were anything but innocent. Atlas was visibly uncomfortable with her behavior, but he handled it well by ignoring her and focusing on conversations with my parents. Her desperate attempt to grab his attention was painfully obvious, and after dinner, it became clear to everyone just how pathetic her moves were. I went to take a shower, leaving Atlas alone when Dove seized the opportunity. She walked in, asking Atlas to call her phone because she couldn't find it. Clearly, this was just a trick to get his number. Atlas told me later that while I was busy, Dove tried to gain his sympathy by sharing a sob story about her divorce and how it took years for her to recover. Even more absurd, Mom joined in, blaming Jeremy and painting Dove as the victim. A little while later, Atlas asked if I wanted to go for a walk and show him around the neighborhood. Before I could respond, Dove jumped up, eagerly volunteering to join us. Atlas gave her a surprised look and calmly said he wanted some alone time with me. The embarrassment on her face was priceless as she slinked back to her room. It's been just a few days since that visit, and I'm already anticipating Dove's next move to try to lure Atlas. Honestly, it scares me, but I trust my man and want to see how he handles her relentless advances. Update 2. Hello everyone, I'm engaged. Atlas proposed to me last month during a trip, and yes, he went down on one knee with a ring. I couldn't stop gushing over it. But of course, after that visit to my parents, Dove didn't stop trying to manipulate Atlas. She texted him, asking how he was doing, and since Atlas loves cats, she started flooding his inbox with cute cat videos, even though she never had any affection for them before. Once she learned that Atlas was a cat lover, she even went so far as to get a cat herself and started sending videos of her new pet to him. At first, Atlas would show me Dove's desperate messages, pretending to care about his work and sending him daily greetings. But after a while, he stopped mentioning her texts. I assumed she had given up and moved on, and so did we. We had so much going on with our hectic work schedules and our future plans, so Dove wasn't much of a topic anymore. But one day, I was scrolling through social media and noticed that Dove had added Atlas on all his accounts. She was liking and commenting on nearly all of his posts, even digging up pictures and videos from 7 to 10 years ago, leaving heart emojis and silly comments. Seeing that gave me a bad feeling, as if she still hadn't let go and was just waiting for another opportunity. I checked Atlas's phone and noticed Dove had been texting him, although all her messages were unread. They were odd, and it was clear she was desperately trying to get his attention. Then I saw missed calls from her, including one around 3 a.m., which made me really anxious. I confronted Atlas about why he hadn't told me Dove was still texting him. He looked nervous and explained he was just ignoring her, thinking it would be better if we didn't talk about her. I pressed him about the calls, and he stayed calm, sitting me down to explain. Apparently, One night, Dove called him upset, and he got scared, thinking something serious had happened. She started talking about traumatic stuff related to Jeremy, saying she needed someone to talk to. Atlas told her it wasn't appropriate to call so late and that she should speak to our parents. Or, better yet, me. Hearing this really bothered me. I told Atlas that keeping this from me made it hard for me to trust him fully. He reassured me, saying he was never going to fall for her games and I had nothing to worry about. But I've read so many stories of husbands falling for such tricks, even when they tried hard to resist, and I didn't want to make a fool of myself by trusting him blindly. I told him that if Dove ever called again, he should hand the phone to me. One night, her call came through and Atlas woke me up. I answered the phone and Dove went silent when she heard my voice. She claimed it was a mistake and hung up. The next day, I tried calling her multiple times to confront her, but she didn't pick up. So I texted her from Atlas's phone, telling her it was me and warning her not to call or text Atlas late at night anymore. I also made it clear that if there was anything urgent, she should contact me instead. After that, Dove stopped texting him, and I finally felt relieved that she was out of our lives. Shortly after, Atlas proposed to me, and we've been moving forward without her interference. I can't believe how low Dove stooped. Trying to sabotage my wedding by spiking Atlas's drink and attempting to seduce him was beyond anything I could have imagined. When I rushed to Atlas's room with my parents, seeing him lying shirtless and slipping in and out of consciousness broke my heart. His groomsmen explained how Dove had come into his room and forced him to take a sip of a drink that was clearly spiked. Atlas, realizing something was off, excused himself to the washroom and immediately called his best friend for help. By the time his friend arrived, Atlas had partially passed out. His friend, who had access to the room, entered and started recording what was happening. He overheard Atlas yelling at Dove to leave him alone while she was undressing herself and rubbing against him. Everything was caught on camera. When Dove saw his friend recording, she tried to act like it was consensual and even smirked, asking him not to tell anyone. We found Atlas still in a dazed state, clearly affected by whatever was in the drink. Solid particles had settled at the bottom of the glass, further proving Dove's malicious intent. My parents were shocked, especially Dad. Mom couldn't defend Dove this time. This was far beyond anything anyone could excuse. Atlas was eventually able to recover from the spiked drink, but it was a long, emotional day for both of us. It felt like a nightmare that Dove would go to such lengths to destroy my happiness. But thankfully, we had the proof we needed to hold her accountable. With my parents fully realizing the extent of Dove's toxicity, we cut her out of our lives for good. Atlas and I still went ahead with the wedding after the situation settled, and though it wasn't the wedding day I imagined, we made it through stronger and more united than ever. Dove's manipulations could never break the bond we share. It was a deeply embarrassing moment for my parents, who couldn't believe Dove would do something so awful. Mom called her to come to Atlas's room, and Dove arrived with smudged lipstick, claiming, "I know you're mad, but it was mutual. Atlas loves me, and he's been making advances since we met. Today, he convinced me for a one-time hookup before the wedding." Mom slapped her hard, telling her we had recorded her deceit. Shocked, Dove was kicked out of the venue before she could cause more trouble. Security was instructed to keep her away. She aimed to make it look like she and Atlas were involved, hoping I'd call off the wedding. My dad called the doctor, who confirmed that Atlas had been given a spiked drink, leaving him disoriented. Atlas's family was furious and wanted to confront Dove, leading my parents to apologize to calm them. The wedding was postponed until Atlas recovered from multiple bouts of vomiting. The news quickly spread among guests, who buzzed about the scandal for days. When Atlas was better, Dad walked me down the aisle. While I was happy to marry him, I was still reeling from the chaos. Atlas included a vow to protect our relationship from harmful people. After our honeymoon, my parents visited, apologizing to Atlas for Dove's actions. Dad assured us Dove would be out of our lives. He had kicked her out and told her to live on her own. I'm still processing the incident, and the wedding was almost canceled if Atlas's friend hadn't recorded everything.